I'm so excited to be here. Thank you very much for welcoming me to GrAiNZ. I just got here this morning, 3 trains and a bus and a little stroll across the road. It was so worth it. I was at a restaurant conference yesterday, which was great, but I was following the socials from here and I was like, I need to get to my people. I need to get to GrAiNZ, and here I am. So yeah, it's just good to feel how it feels here. Maaryasha is a neighbour of mine, an employer of one of my children, and yeah, just an incredible, generous gift to the Ripponlea community and the baking world. So I'm excited to be here next to you today, Maaryasha.
Oh, thank you. The honour is mine. I'm not a professional. Dani's a professional. I want to introduce Dani as well. A lot of you have probably read what Dani wrote, but Dani is like one of the most generous, supportive, kind, curious food journalists. And the first time that we met, by the way, we have like a few it's like a few degrees of separation. It's not too far. Nikki and then my sister, yeah. So then Dani called me because she wanted to write about something with sourdough. So we started chatting on the phone and I started like going on and then started talking about sourdough, and this was like 5 years ago. And then I started talking about GrAiNZ and I started like tripping out about, oh, my besties, and there's Kim, and there's this and that. She's like, yeah, I know. And then I said, there was just this article in the newspaper all about it. She's like, yeah, I wrote it, I know. Today we're going to talk about, we're going to go over how to make babka in kind of very brief steps. We're also going to talk about like sweet sourdough baking and the challenges and what I've learnt. And we're going to talk also, we want to connect a lot of that with how food connects us to our culture, connects other people to our culture, how it creates community. And we're also going to talk about how babka is an example of like an immigrant food that has evolved together with the people, and how it's changed and it's got a very strong relationship with the community around it. And babka just as an example. I just want to, before I start, I just want to thank Michael and Pippa. They worked like really, really hard to pull this together. And also to just honour the fact that they managed to pull everything together in the most beautiful way, no matter what they do. I don't know if they're here or whatever. Oh yeah, whether it's GrAiNZ or a cake or a cookbook. I also want to thank Meek, for like working so hard and opening her bakery for all of us. I also really want to credit Ian. I'm not sure, like, Ian has been one of the most important people in this whole movement. He's mellowed a little bit, he's a little quiet lately. But the influence that he's had he was one of the first bakers that started sharing a lot of information. Things used to be kind of kept a little secret, and he was really about sharing and community and support and abundance and curiosity and always pushing and pushing and pushing. And a lot of people are using his formulas or have had that influence. So I think we really need to credit Ian. Thank you for your mind and for your generosity and for your humour. I think that our talk about community and GrAiNZ and my own story and stuff is going to come through while we bake, because the starter is ready now. So I'm using for the sourdough a sweet young starter, which is like a short rise starter. So I found it's got more strength, and I found that the sweet sourdough is you reduce the sourness. I went on a long journey to try and of understanding when there was sourness and why, and I tried a lot of things, and I think it really comes down to 2 things. To the starter, like you've got to catch it right, it's got to be fresh, and I also think it comes down to the first rise, the bulk. I think that if you're doing a sweet sourdough, you have to bulk it really, really warm for the first rise, or it kind of goes on forever for the second rise, and then you end up with like, I mean, we've had like gym sock fermentation and all sorts of things if you don't catch it right. I didn't understand all of that when I was baking from the garage because I didn't have any equipment. So I had like a bit of trauma with some of this stuff. I don't make sourdough croissants. Ours are yeasted. I really have a bit of PTSD. But we've slowly set up the bakery with more temperature control so we can get more consistency with the sweet stuff and like better flavour. But this is how the starter, we use a liquid starter. There's people are using stiff, whatever. And actually this dough, when we made it yesterday, my sweet starter wasn't ready. So I used Ken's stiff whole wheat starter. So this is actually with a whole wheat starter. So if you all want to come and like take Babka and have a look at the starter and have a look at the Babka when it's ready, like now, please come and do that. It's my technique of distracting you so that it doesn't matter what we say. I grew up eating what we call chocolate yeast cake. So every Shabbat morning, which is our Sabbath, we had cake and coffee. That's like our tradition. My parents, I would wake up and before my dad went to synagogue, my parents would be having coffee and cake in the morning. My grandmother is from Russia, and my grandparents, my other grandfathers are from Poland. So there's a very strong cake culture in my family. And all my aunties were all obsessed with cake and with baking. We grew up baking. And it was all yeasted. And then through a certain point, like when I was traveling and whatever, it changed to the word Babka. And it's evolved over time from when I was younger. It's evolved like quite fast because I think I'm 40 whatevers. I'm 42. But when I was little, the Babka was like simple. It was taken, if you wanted to make it dairy-free, it was taken off the challah dough and then it was rolled, like you just keep a little bit aside, put with cinnamon and sugar, and then you'd have it for coffee the next morning. And it was pretty acceptable to be dry. Or you'd just do chocolate. My grandmother loves butter, so she'd do a butter yeast cake. And she had all the little fillings, and my aunties would do it. And then slowly, it's become like much more. There's the Israeli type, I guess, where most Jews went from Europe due to persecution and things like that, was New York and Israel, like the main, I would say, Jewish immigrant foods. And with that, I also want to say that the first kind of European bakeries in Melbourne were also started by immigrant Jews who came from Europe. So like, yeah, we can name a bunch of them and a lot of people who know them. Like in the 60s and stuff, yeah. So now, where we are now is you can get like the old school babka, but it's not so acceptable anymore for a babka to be dry. That's kind of like blasphemous. So now it's like syruped and it's full of chocolate and nuts and Nutella and all this stuff that they would have been like rolling in their grave back in the day. But yeah, and so like I'm like obsessed with that. I'm obsessed with making sure it's not dry because I'm the one that has to deal with the customers, and yeah, so we overfill. But when you're making, so when I started making sourdough, and I guess like 10 years ago when I started connecting to the GrAiNZ community, and Ian, I think he left and all of that, we were on this whole mission of this sweet sourdough, just challenging ourselves with trying to make crazy stuff. And a lot of it wasn't good, but once you get going, it's hard to go back. And I think I persisted with the sourdough babka because yeasted babka can go dry pretty fast. Like it doesn't have as long shelf life. So I was kind of like obsessed with that. And also if you get it right, there's a bit of a depth of flavor. So yeah, that's how it kind of evolved. And there's a bit of differences with sourdough babka than yeasted babka. But this dough is full of eggs and butter. I'll mix a little bit just to show you how I do it in the order that I do it, which it's probably not new for a lot of you.
Maaryasha, do you want to just explain just a bit of a 101 on kosher and how that plays into the different babkas that you make?
The kosher has like a few main restrictions. One of them is that you can't mix meat and dairy. So it's very traditional on Shabbat to have meat, especially because meat is like more expensive and people like to do nicer things for the weekend. So they're not allowed to have dairy for dessert. So we do like a dairy-free one, and then we do a dairy one, and all has to be labelled. And my bakery is super kosher, which is like the highest level of kosher. It's a bit of a spectrum. That's because my parents and my brother who live here are super kosher, and I just wasn't comfortable making a bakery that they couldn't eat at. But that means that all our dairy has to be supervised for the entire process by a Jew. So I only have one type of dairy that I can use, and I have one butter, and it's like quite challenging. One feta, one cream, one milk, and if they don't have feta, I don't have feta, and if they don't, that's called Halab Israel, but that we call super kosher. And when I started making, when I started using butter, actually I was the only like baker. I wasn't a baker. I don't know. I'm still not, but I wasn't.
She's a baker.
There was no butter. There was no. They had no marker for butter. So I would get butter like that had been frozen 2 years ago. Yeah. So I think
basically like all the kosher bakers, like the standard kosher bakers, they all use margarine.
Yeah. No one in their right mind as a baker will use the butter that she's giving. Like honestly, the first time I saw her, I'm like, no way.
I tried making my own. You can't make, like, it's good for a little bit, you can't. I think it's taught me, like all of us, I think, doing sourdough to be more resilient and adaptable and stuff. And slowly there's been more demand and more bakeries have opened up now doing dairy. The traditional ones feel like they had their peak in the 80s a little bit with like margarine and dough improvers and stuff like that. So I didn't like any of that food, so I wanted to make something that I would eat at. So that's how The bakery also started because I used to have a lot of people over for Saturday morning for coffee and cake. So I would like bake, and then slowly people come and more people come, and then it just evolved into a kind of bakery.
Okay, you make it, but there's more stories to tell, but I reckon get going.
Okay. Milk.
It was here.
Oh, in the fridge.
Oh, here. Was it this one? That doesn't matter.
This recipe evolved from combinations of like Ian and Maurizio and whatever it was, yeah. So it is what it is. And then you adjust the water and stuff. Never use the mixer. What I want to do is actually put the babkas in the oven first.
Yeah.
My grandmother's favourite, like crumble, this is our love language. So if you come to, I worked out I use almost 50 kilos of just crumble a week, for over 2 days. We make a lot of crumble. I'm very, I'm obsessed with texture. So, Sorry?
What's in your crumble?
This is equal portions of, the simplest crumble that you can do is equal portions of butter, flour, sugar, and a bit of salt. And then you go from there. So then you can stuff around with your sugars. So you can use white, brown, raw, for different textures, different colours. You can add your cinnamon. Then you can adjust your flour and add your oats. You can adjust some of the sugars and add your honey and your maple syrup and your golden syrup. But if you just keep like 1 to 1 to 1, and you can also have a feel for the texture. Like we were baking this a lot with my grandmother growing up. And you just have to learn over time, and I'll make some crumble of like how not to make it dry and how not to overmix. But a crumble is kind of just like a cookie.
What would your grandmother think of this much crumble on the babka?
Yeah, it's good. She loves it. She's tried to make a cake where she's tried to put like the most amount of crumble just before it sinks. She's done a lot of that. And then worked out the right amount of like how you can put the most, Sourdough babka. Does anyone make sourdough babka? Oh, two?
Just a couple, okay.
If the reason why I do it in those is because I had so much proving trouble in the garage that I was like, when I go to a shop, I'm going to make scrolls. And then I realized why. Because scrolls is even proving. It's just even proving. It's like fail proof, pretty much. It could be a bit under, it could be a bit over, but it's not tricky. When you fill a babka with stuff, and a lot of stuff, you're going to have areas that prove different times. There's a bit of a relationship in my dreams between like a sourdough babka and a panettone, but like when you're making an enriched sourdough, it's a little bit fragile when it's fully proved, and you're not going to hang a babka upside down. The ideal way to bake a babka in a loaf is just underproved a little bit, just to let you know, yeah. And if you bake a fully proved, you can have sinky areas, and then over it can sink. So then you have to find your customers that like the gooey bits, and then the ones that like the, yeah.
Everyone likes that, don't they? Just like the babka. I mean, you could slice it, but isn't it all about pulling it and the different bits and finding a bit of crunch and looking for a bit more crunch than getting a bit more babka on the way?
Well, I think it's the ideal cake to share because something for everyone. There's like the top, the bottom, the sides, the middle, yeah. So we'll put them in the oven.
Yeah.
I reckon these are a little bit over, but we'll be right.
One thing about Maaryasha, I don't know if everybody's like this, but whenever you get something from there, especially babka, it's like, it's not right. She's like always apologising. It's not right. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. This one, no, it's this, it's that. But always it's amazing.
It's definitely not always amazing.
But I think we need to talk more about the garage days and what it was like, because this is a talk about baking and community. And, you know, we've heard this sort of macro story about babka and how it transitioned. I mean, I'm Jewish. I grew up, the word babka wasn't something, it was not a thing. We didn't eat it. We had the yeasted cake. And as Maaryasha says, like babka, this word suddenly started being applied and became more loaded, with more fillings. But I think you should talk about how, in the garage days, how you started introducing, I guess, quality grain and sourdough to the kosher community.
Yeah.
And how much of a hard sell it was.
Yeah. I'm like old enough that I got sourdough started from the hippies. Like back in the day, there was a couple people like Ken and John and Firebrand, but they were like the kind of purest punks of the Australian baking community. And then there was the hippies doing the sourdough. And I was living in Israel for about 8 years. And then someone just gave me starter maybe 14 years ago or something. And they just gave me like a little piece of paper, this is what you do. And then I started making it and it was very dense. I've always had a love for bread, but I went on like a major mission to try and make it more edible and lighter. And there was maybe one sourdough bakery there popping up, I kind of knew. So I used to hound them. I was like, tell me how you do it. There's definitely yeast in it. I don't understand. And this was before, like, Instagram was kind of new. There wasn't much information. The books, definitely, and I think this is a little bit changed, but the books were never geared to really like home bakers. They were either written by pros trying to be home, so they never really understood the challenges. There was like a couple blogs. Tartine book I didn't even have yet. I don't know when it came out, around then, but so I was like, I slowly became obsessed and obsessed and obsessed, and then with each kid, with my life being like totally out of control. I have 3 kids, and with each one, and I'm like hyperactive and I have to have control, and it was just really hard having the kids that I found that when I had a baby was my most obsessed. Like I would wear this baby in a sling and have a hot oven like coming out. I think that was my way of coping with all the insanity. So after the first one, that's when I really started, and then the second one a lot. So that I moved to Australia when I had 2 kids 8 or 9 years ago. I grew up in I just left for a couple of years, and I could make a loaf in a pot, and no one had seen that before and no one had eaten that before. So it started to be my like little party trick. If you come to my house, then you get the bread, and then people started asking me to make it for them. And then my cousins who are obsessed with baking said, can you please teach us how to do it? So then I started doing a workshop. Before, there was no resources really. I think there was the Tartine book and then Hammelman, which is an amazing book, by the way, bread, slowly started doing workshops, and then people started saying, can you make me, can you make me? And then when I had my 3rd kid, my life really went to shit, and I couldn't. And then I used to stare at people's Instagram of micro bakeries. I was like, I want that, but I can't have it. I'm a physio, I'm a pediatric physio. I'm like a neuro pediatric physio. And for like 12 years, you work with disability. And in Israel, I worked in a hospital, so I think I had a lot of like adrenaline. But then when I moved here, I wasn't working in a hospital, and it was just a little crazy with 3 kids. And then one day I just decided I would be staring at all these Instagrammers and trying to look at all inside their little micro bakeries, and then just thinking, oh, I can't have that. I'm a physio, I can't have that. And then one day, I think I just felt like shit, and things just, I don't know, and we were moving houses, and I opened the door to the garage, and it was really big, and I was like, you know what? No one's gonna make my life how I want it. No one's gonna improve my life. It's not gonna happen on its own. I'm just gonna do it. I gave myself permission to do something that I really wanted to do. So I decided that I wanted to have a bakery, but I didn't know how to have a bakery. So I was like, well, I better learn how to have a bakery. So I went to Ian's for a week, and then I came back, and then I kind of waited to just learn how to have a bakery. And I was like staring at this room, baking in a pot, like 10 loaves. It takes 10 hours to make 10 loaves in a pot. And it's like hard, it's harder than anything. And then so then I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it. And then I just collected equipment. Like, my partner was working in a warehouse at the time, and then he just found a Coles kitchen that was going to get thrown out, so we just brought that, and then we just brought stuff, and I bought a Rofco, and I brought like a mixer, and then just started baking. And then the second that I started, it was crazy. First it was in my home kitchen, it was just crazy. There would be like a mess everywhere, and all the customers were coming and they were like licking off my dirty dishes. They're like, we want more, like more. I remember my auntie coming around to the thing being like, where's the half a custard? I'm gonna fill my own donut. It was crazy, yeah. And then I moved to the garage, and then it was really, really crazy. It was just on Friday, and I was still doing other physio jobs, and then slowly I just quit the other jobs. And I had to really think about why I was doing that a lot, because I was giving up kind of one career. And then I really had to get out of the house, or I was going to get divorced. I know people, yeah, there's a lot of romance maybe, but in reality there's like, you have 5 bags of flour in your house, then 10, then 20, then 30, then the whole grown milling guys like in your house with the thing, and then there's like lines of customers. And it was really hard for my family, like my kids and my husband. And then it just took time to find a shop. Why are we talking about this?
It's important. It's a good story, right?
Sorry.
But I think, do you need to make something while you're talking?
Yeah. So basically, when people started coming, I would say, this is bread. This is how you have to eat it. This is what you have to do. Try this rye bread. It's different to what, because I remember like some weird rye bread when I was a kid. They're like, I would give it free to a lot of people. Just try it. It's different. Try that. Had to teach people, yeah, slowly, person by person, yeah. That was your original question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got that. But I think, you you do what you got to do, because I feel like we're going to be here till 5.
Yeah. That's standard.
There was queues down the street, and I guess when we think about micro bakers, we do see queues outside waiting for this beautiful bread. But I'd say what Maaryasha was doing in this kosher community, where people couldn't just go and try, they couldn't shop anywhere. She really had to bring people on a journey. And I'd say, Jews can be pretty direct, right? Like if they think
you're allowed to
something,
say that.
I can say that.
Yeah.
If they think something shouldn't cost $8, then they're going to talk to you about it. And so you really had to bring people with you.
Yes and no. I had to explain it and stuff like that, but I feel really, really, really lucky. And I'm just like having fun and making different stuff, and people are just really receptive, and I'm very thankful, yeah. And in our little street, and it's like an amazing little community in the street. They all help each other, and Dani, the artist, and I, we were talking. He's just got an art studio up across the road, and we just feel really, really lucky that we can have so much fun, and people are receptive, and yeah, feel very lucky. And I've had to learn a lot, like how to, I overbaked. Yeah, with my mind and stuff. I just worked and worked and worked and baked, and I have like back injuries and stuff, so I've had to really learn how to like make less chaos. It's still pretty hectic. I kind of, as people say these days, I guess I'm a sensory seeker, but I like hectic and stuff, but I've really had to learn how to bake less, be better on my body, slowly upgrading equipment, getting more staff, learning to manage staff. Yeah, it's been a process. Also getting more help at home. Like both my partner and I work a lot, and we have the little kids. And so in the beginning I thought I could do it all without help and stuff. But
it was a little chaotic. So I've had to learn how to make that more organised, and then heal my body a little bit. I used to bake and no sleep and lift heavy crates like on top of stuff over there in tight space. And I thought I could do it, but eventually then your back disc and, right? Your back, how's your backs? I think we talk so much about sustainability in ingredients, but I feel like 10 years ago when we started meeting in GrAiNZ or whenever it was everyone was obsessed with like, do you pre-shave or do you not pre-shave? Do you use that or do you mix that many minutes on fast or slow? And I feel like I went to high school with my GrAiNZ friends, like evolving, watching people's lives change and adapt. And the conversation's so different now. Like, but really it's so much more about your personal life and not burning out, and people have gotten sick and people have gotten bigger families and smaller families and stuff. It's so special being here and watching that evolve, but the conversation changes because if you bake and too much, you can't bake for very long. So I think it's something that very passionate people struggle with in hospitality. Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's such a good point, such a salient point, because I suppose we're talking about baking and community, and of course we're feeding a community and bringing, these amazing products to a community, but the baker needs a community to support them as well. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. There needs to be a big back room.
And also, just to look after yourself as a baker, it's like the hardest thing to do, And I don't know, I'm learning. And I think, a lot of us are learning. But it's not a joke. And I learn the hard way. I keep learning the hard way. I'm doing all the liquids first. Liquids are cold because you're going to incorporate the butter. We do our babka. Our butter is soft. Not too soft, but it's not hard. So if you want to mix brioche, I think you do much harder butter because you don't want the dough to get too warm. And we have better results with softer butter. And the starter floats. But the float test is not a real thing. You know that, Okay. Because you can have a starter that floats but still underproofed. Flour and sugar. Salt. I got all this from Meek. She doesn't know. Thank you, Meek.
I do.
I came to my bakery and it was shut on Sunday because the landlord decided to do all these renovations and my cool room was shut. Just standard again. Like even when I've been here, Meek, so much shit has happened just in one day in a bakery. It just happens. It's all the time. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Can we ask you how much your ingredients
are? Yeah. Eggs.
A couple of handfuls of starter.
No. Flour, sweet starter, water, milk, sugar, eggs, butter, and salt. We'll mix it and then I'll add the salt. I've left out the butter and the salt just now, and I'm going to add the sugar, not the salt. This flour is just the organic premium from Meek. I keep my, our babka is white. It would be fun to do whole wheat, but it's white.
What are some of the different flavours you put through the babka?
So the fillings. Let's talk fillings. So I used to do a filling with the babka where you melt chocolate and butter and then you add icing sugar and cocoa. You might be familiar with that sort of filling. And we're only allowed to use, because of the kosher restrictions, it has to be fully dairy free, and I want to use good quality. So the Calibo dark chocolate, the 54%. So I was doing that, and no matter what we did, there was a sourness at the end of the babka, no matter what I did. And then I realized that the sourness from the chocolate is
there's a combination happening there between the, I don't know how to lock this. Michael, how do you lock this? I don't know. If you are making sourdough stuff and you don't want a sourness at the tank, I don't like it. Some people like it. A lot of things can feed off each other and create like aftertastes. And I found that I don't know how to do this. Oh yeah, that the Calibo dark chocolate was creating like some sort of reaction and it was making it too sour. But it took me a long time of all the time. By the way, Dani's been there when I've been doing all these experiments and I've got like 10 babkas there of all different things. Try this, try that, try this, try that.
They were all pretty good.
So then I just went back and I actually, this filling is, oh yes, yes. I also want to thank Hayden for his support throughout the years. I've paid for it, we know I've paid for it, but anyway, this is, he'll work it out. This filling is just butter, sugar, icing sugar, and it's a cocoa filling.
What's the timer?
We can do cinnamon, but I found with cinnamon and sugar, you can get leakage of the sugar because there's a long rise. So then you're baking it in like a pool of sugar. You're nodding. Do you guys know? Do you know? Yeah, and then it just can play around with the proving a little bit. The Christmas one is cream pat with soaked raisins in spices. We did the hot cross babka. Yeah.
Anzac Babka.
Anzac babka.
They're a mixed up teddy.
I think that the bakery, like when I moved to a shop, I needed to be sure that I had enough people to sustain the bakery. And my idea was this crossover a little bit of like the people from the religious community that wanted to eat food that was not accessible to them, and then people from the non-Jewish community that wanted to have food that was also not accessible to them, or like different sorts of food. So there would be a bit of a diversity of people that want to try different things. And I think being in that like fringe market of like not being a standard bakery in terms of anything really allows me to kind of do whatever I want, and as long as which is good fun.
Have you had any pushback from the Orthodox community about doing hot cross babka, for example?
Only once when I crossed the babka, a customer came and was like, ugh. I'm like, it's just food. But no, it's just fun, yeah. And also when I watch all my baker friends like die over Easter, I'm like, and Christmas, yeah. I was like, I can make as many as I want, as little as I want. I do have a big challenge though, because people think that because I'm Jewish, that it's a Jewish bakery. So they come and they want challah every Friday, and every person used to ask me, challah, challah, challah. Why don't you have challah? Why don't you have challah? And it was very annoying, and it was really hard. And I don't know. My bakery is not a Jewish bakery. I am Jewish. I didn't grow up eating like steak and chips or McDonald's. Like I had a different heritage with different food. So the bakery is an expression of like my childhood, my curiosities, whatever I feel like making, good bread, like my ideals of feeding community. So we had to like teach people a lot about that. We still get that a lot about the challah. I used to make a little bit of sourdough challah, and it would sell out in 5 minutes, and then for 5 hours we had to say no to everybody, and it just, we're not set up for challah, we don't do challah.
Does everyone know what challah is? Okay, so traditionally bought and eaten on the Sabbath table on a Friday night.
Yes.
Maaryasha's bakery is only open Wednesdays and Fridays, and she, I grew up Jewish, but not kosher and not as observant as Maaryasha and her family. So for me, living in the neighbourhood, it's just a really nice way where you can connect with some of the Jewish holidays and traditions, because even the fact that she closes for 2 weeks over Passover, which happened just recently, even that is a nice marker. Even the fact that the bakery is closed and you get a chance to really miss the bread is a nice way to be.
It's a forced closure, by the way. It's part of our kosher.
It's part of the kosher. Yeah, I know, but it's nice, and that some of the other traditions, like you make hamantashen, right?
Hamantashen, yeah.
Yeah.
So like particular baked goods or biscuits that will go with certain Jewish holidays, but then also Anzac biscuits, for example. So just really very cross-cultural.
I really love it.
I think, I mean, it's so clear that you do love it, and I think that really comes through. There's a real joy to the abundance.
I think that what I was trying to articulate, which I can't articulate, and I think a lot of you will find it because a lot of you are micro bakers and you've reintroduced like old school bread to your community, and you found your people that are like, oh my God, this is my childhood, this is my grandmother, I need this for my dad. And so I think that what we wanted to explore also is how food connects people to their home, the nostalgia. I have a lot of fun with nostalgia. Like I make stuff, I get a little bit of a kick out of it. I don't know why, but like with the poppy seed, I
was just going to say about the poppy seed.
Yeah. Like it brought people from there's an exciting thing happening where you show people food from their home that they haven't had. If you like know maybe how to articulate all those sorts of feelings of why we do what we do, which is you're connecting people to like certain parts of themselves. It's very special.
Well, it's a real bridge. And when Maaryasha made this poppy seed tart, I saw it had apricot jam in the base, and as soon as I saw it, I pretty much like cleared the diary and had to get some and take it straight to my dad, who grew up in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, and after he came to Australia, ate at the cake shops on Ackland Street, and it was. I think it's about connecting to those stories, but also enabling people to connect, make further connections in their own lives. So it's a real, real beautiful web of connection.
Has to go faster. Yeah.
How's it going over there? Just hanging with the mixer.
When I was using the organic flour when we were making the Babka meats yesterday, I need to add actually a lot more water. So I wanted you to see like the texture of it when it looks, but it's not going to really work today, but that's okay.
Do you want to talk about the rugula?
Yeah, but I think the Babka, what I wanted to say also about how the Babka has changed from what it was to what it is now, represents also like the immigrants that came from nothing, and then now life is more abundant. And I wish I was at Jason's talk yesterday, but I think there's a lot of parallel also with GrAiNZ going through like exile, redemption, food representing times of plenty and times of scarce, and Babka's like a very strong example of that. Yeah. The word Babka I think comes from Baba, grandmother, and it was like a grandmother's cake. Just if anyone wants to know the word. No, you know what we'll do? While we're mixing the dough, we'll roll it.
Yeah.
I did make rugelach. I plan on doing rugelach because I wasn't sure we would have much to talk about, but
Okay.
I don't think we'll have time for rugelach. But I do have rugelach dough. We'll have a play after, and I will show you different shapes of rugelach. And also rugelach dough is an amazing dough as well. I also made galettes out of the rugelach dough. But this is a New York rugelach dough, as opposed to the Israeli Easter dough. So we can show that later. But it's a very enriched dough with cream cheese and butter and flour.
Hi.
Can you say ch?
The chocolate filling, can we
Yep. Yeah. Because I don't melt the chocolate anymore because I didn't like the taste. Yeah. So it's just butter, icing sugar, whipped. I use icing sugar in the fudgy. I don't know. Yeah. Cocoa powder and what else? Cream. I use cream or sour cream. My grandmother does like a drinking chocolate sour cream thing, so I was just kind of thinking of her. But we use cream or sour cream depending on what we can have. We don't have today, but I put cinnamon in everything, a little bit of cinnamon. I think it's a little good depth of flavour and salt. For the vegan one, it's an oil-based one with icing sugar cocoa oil. And that ideally you want to mix them both. You want like blobs of that one, but that gives like the goo that people really want in babka. They want the goo everywhere, and the but I didn't make that today. So it's just whipped. I think it's equal portions of butter, icing sugar, and then half of that of cocoa, and equal of cream as well. Your cream you have to adjust depending on your cream. This is babka that we made earlier. It's sourdough.
You did the walnut one?
Walnut. Who asked that? Oh, the walnut.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like the strudel and the...
Oh, yeah, the arugula.
cherry and the cream. You do that one? Cream cheese?
Inside?
Yeah.
No, tell us.
Oh no, I just like thought maybe because you do the fillings, the other muscles that you bring out. My mother's Polish, so
Yeah. So how do you feel when we're talking about it?
It's evolved a lot, you know, that's what I can say, that, you know, it was like you said, it was a lot drier back in the day, and I like that dry texture, because when you have tea with it, it's, you know, you dunk it in with tea and coffee, and it's dry.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't, my grandmother wouldn't want all that goo, yeah. Yeah, that's why you got different options for different people.
Yeah. And everything evolved. Must evolve. You know, must evolve. But yeah, there's also like the nostalgia of what you grew up with.
Yeah. I also think that I have a lot of fun taking something old that I used to think was yuck and trying to make it yum. Like, like the knishes, they were like disgusting. Like the pastry was like margarine, the whole thing was disgusting. And even the poppy seed cakes and stuff. I think a lot of us are trying to do that in different kind of ways.
Tell people what a knish is.
It's a savoury pastry. Yeah, and I don't know like, my husband's American, my sister-in-law's are American, so when I started giving them, is this a knish, is this a knish? They said, no, it's not a knish, it needs to be more doughy, it needs to be, and then I realised they're talking about something disgusting. They like it. They like it because they like it. It's like
Make
all that
it
love
worse.
Macca's or whatever, like it's so bad but it's good, you love it. They love that stuff, and I was like, actually, I'm just not going to listen to you. And then it just evolved, and yeah, it still evolves, but for the dairy babka, this is quite overproved. It's travelled near and far and everywhere in between. But if you're using a butter, it's really easy on a cold dough. So it's a 3-day process. So we do the starter Monday morning for the young one, then we mix it at like midday, 1 o'clock, then let it bulk for 4 hours. We do a couple folds, controversial, I know. And then we sheet it up, and actually we sheet it out like that to stop fermentation. Otherwise, if you put the whole thing in your cool room as a big thing, it gets too warm. So it's same like croissant and whatever. So then we sheet it up. We learnt this through all the mistakes. When people ask if I went to school, like bakery school, I said I went to the school of fuck-uppery. I just fucked up, remember? So it's much easier to spread like a butter thing at room temperature on a cold dough, and then you spread it. And do all your fillings. I don't have any today. Chuck in all your stuff. I spread it a bit thinner, but I don't have a rolling pin today.
By the way, how was the babka? They stuck around to find out how you make it, so it must have been good.
It was a long story. It always is. No, over time we have more provers and stuff in the bakery, so there's a lot more control over it. That was massive, to get a prover retarder and then another prover. Yeah, that changed everything.
So what sort of scale are you baking at the moment? Like, how much do you produce?
Yeah, people think actually our bakery is very big, but actually it's tiny. It's like tiny that it's like unsafe tiny. It's 50 square meters. I used to bake just on a Friday, and then when I moved into the shop, I didn't know how to mix and bake like a lot of you guys. It's amazing. I didn't know how to do that, and I was just by myself. So I decided I'll mix on Tuesday, bake on Wednesday, mix on Thursday, bake on Friday, and then we just pushed it and pushed it and pushed it and pushed it until there's like no room to do anything else. Like we can't do any prep really on a Wednesday, not much, a little bit. So we're still open Wednesday and Friday. I think we do like. One day I was walking past the front counter, which is just, the front of house is literally just a little table. And I saw so many varieties of products that didn't fit on the table. I was like, oh, I think maybe it was like falling off. So then I decided to count how many products, like options. And I counted like 60, which is...
And what kind of quantities are you making?
So
of
yeah,
some
the
of those?
quantities, because it's like, of the trays at Babka, probably... It's small quantities.
Just to say some numbers, Maaryasha.
Oh, numbers? Probably of those, like on 8 of those trays, and then probably 50 loaves of the babka, and I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We do too many different things that, yeah. We probably use, we're small and we're open 2 days a week, probably use 80 kilos of butter. Bread Club uses, I worked out how much Bread Club uses. Guess, you want to guess? Someone guess. Not you, someone else. You guess.
I think
Who, guess how much Bread Club uses? It doesn't matter. I reckon around 250. I think so, yeah.
A week or 2 days?
No, but we're still very small. We have very small equipment. How's it going? Yeah, I'll show you the twist. So it used to be just baked like this. Or my grandmother used to take, my auntie would take 2 of those and twist them together. Yeah. And you know what? You don't need syrup if you do that because the middle stays moist. Yeah, and then the Israelis started doing the whole thing like where you split it in half. Well, I'll show you, and it starts looking pretty. And they changed the standard a little bit. And then you need the syrup because then it gets dry because it's more open and you've cooked the chocolate out more. But when it's covered like old school, it stays moist on the inside. Yeah, very few people will do that anymore. Yeah.
Maaryasha, you were talking about the process.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Sheet it down. Next day, Tuesday and Thursday, it's the same Monday, so Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Leave it out in the morning, and then at the end of all the sheeting, then we sheet out the dough. It's on the tray, sheet it out, put all the filling, make all the stuff, then they go back in the fridge. And then they come out, and then they go into the prover, 30 degrees, and they probably take, if they've had a really good bulk, it probably takes 4 or 5 hours in the prover. And a good bulk, it's got to be 28 to 30 degrees. If you're doing a sweet sourdough, it has to be 28 to 30. Yeah, nodding, yeah. Otherwise, it just doesn't bulk fast enough. And then if things take too long, then you'll get sour notes and stuff like that. I'll try and do the twist, but the dough is at room temperature. So what people would do if you really wanted perfect babkas is you would cut them like that, put them in the fridge or the freezer for a bit to stiffen up. Seam side, yeah, straight down. Line it up. Oh, can you see? Cross it over. The other thing I want to say is when we make loaves that are probably burning in the oven, I haven't checked. Oh, did you? Yeah. I like it better. We divide each dough in 500 grams, 500 gram, 500 gram, 500 gram. I think it's harder to make it look nicer if you like sheet it long and then you can a bit. I think maybe that one was sheeted long, but it looks nicer if you cut your dough smaller and you do individuals. It's a little bit more time consuming, but that's what we do. Yeah, and it's more even, and yeah, then you don't get the big like things popping up at the sides. Yeah. Ideally, also you should tuck it under a little bit to help it dome up. And you should also bake it just before it's proofed. Yeah, and I think it's not like panettone, but I think it's similar with panettone that you need to bake it just before, possibly. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah. Cool?
Yay!
It's more. There's more process. We have to make the syrup. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Hopefully it times together. Yes. Your babka needs to be between 94 and 98 degrees. We check the middle of all the babkas, and they need to be 94 to 98 degrees. And then if it's like sunken and stuff, you know it's a proving issue or too much filling, or you know if you've put apples in babka before, you'll notice that it will boil the dough around it, so you can have gumminess. But if you have measured the temperature of your babka and it's between 94 and 98, you know the gumminess is not from underbaking. It's from the too much liquid, from the filling, or the proving issue. Cool? That is, I think, really important. The dough, yeah. The dough is finished. It's quite nice. Thanks, Hayden. Do you guys know Hayden? Yeah. Does anyone have a thermometer?
So when you say the dough is good, what are you seeing?
Oh yeah, silky, smooth, a little bit wet. I don't like dry. Hayden, I don't know how to do. Hayden is a equipment guy for Van Roy, very supportive, and he's gonna. While he takes it around, he's gonna sell you equipment. He's gonna tell him what you need.
Probably not that exciting.
If you don't have temperature, yeah, probe. During lockdown, Dani kind of became an advocate for like small businesses and a lot of people struggling. And it's like amazing. And I also think that we should talk a little bit about that. But when I was like approached, I was, you know, I'm like very insecure, and I was like very nervous about like a food journalist and all the rating culture and all that sort of stuff. And like I just didn't want to go into that whole world. And Dani is like against, like she's not, she's the most, talk about why you're not like that. Why are you like kind and supportive, like in a world that is not always so kind and supportive as like a food critic?
Okay. Well, I suppose a little bit about me. I come at food writing from the writing side, not so much from the food side. I always loved food. Food was a big part of my family growing up, but what I always wanted to be was a writer. And I fell into travel writing while I was still doing my 10-year-long arts degree. I worked as a travel author for Lonely Planet and travelled around the world doing guidebooks, which was a real privilege. It was really great. But Lonely Planet started going into guides to world cuisine. And one day my boss said to me, Dani, we need someone to go to Turkey to eat. I was like, I can do that. So yeah, I was sent to Turkey to write a book about Turkish food, a guide to Turkish cuisine. And yeah, I had no real qualifications to do that, except I was curious. I loved travelling. I loved writing. I would eat anything. And it was really from that first day I was in Istanbul. and I had all these leads, like things I wanted to eat and discover and learn about. One of them was yogurt, and I was told there was a guy that was making yogurt down a particular laneway. You had to go this way, you had to go there, you had to ask this person, get the next directions. And finally I found this guy and started chatting to him about the yogurt and the cheese that he was making, and instantly I was talking to him about things that were really at the heart of who he was, where his family had come from, you know, his great uncle that had come over the mountains with goats. And it was instantly more interesting than the sort of travel writing that I was doing, which was very detail-oriented. Lonely Planet guides, you know, back in the day, you know, essential compendiums, but it was a lot of bus timetables, opening hours. You know, did the youth hostel have bed bugs?
Streisel. I'm just going to make Streisel. Crumble. You keep talking, yes.
And that was great. Like, it was amazing being a travel writer, but to be a food writer and to be able to talk to, you know, he was crying, I was crying, like it was just so at the heart of everything. And, you know, that's about 20 years ago. And I think there's not a day that I've been working as a food writer that I haven't felt that sense of privilege and engagement and richness. So why wouldn't you be nice? Like, it's just such...
Well, I think you view food not just as like, all right, let's see what this chef's going to make. Let's see how good his food's going to be. I think you look at food in a much more wholesome, like deep way of who's making it and why they're making it and how are they here and...
Well, I think that's why I feel so comfortable at GrAiNZ. And, you know, the first GrAiNZ that I went to in Trentham was, I just was like, oh my, these are my people, because, yeah, you guys are all about connection and about the food supply and about where do things come from and how do you honour them. And, yeah, when you talk about bread or beer, you're talking about really ancient foods that have driven history. And I think that's what when I write about food, it's all about context. So it's about, you know, it's about the environment, it's about politics, it's about biology, it's about polysaccharides, and it's just about everything. It crosses everything. So I think I'm just endlessly interested, and I just know that if I keep writing about food, I'll always keep learning and meeting great people. I think that period, you know, a few years ago when we were just at the start of the pandemic, that was a time to really lean into the idea of community and the communities that you could create around food. So again, I guess, why wouldn't you do that?
We're going to pass around the Streisel. My ideal Streisel is like different size clumps, small, big. It looks prettier, it creates different textures, more interesting, not too dry. How did you become like an advocate for foreign workers or during lockdown?
So I've always been, I guess, interested in social justice, and I guess when you're really curious about food, that's going to happen, because it's you know, I write about cafes and bakeries, but I also write about fancy restaurants. So I suppose the whole question of access to food is, you need to think about that. At the start of the pandemic, really early on, when JobKeeper was announced, the Prime Minister at the time, whose name we don't need to mention, said it became clear that it wasn't going to be available to temporary visa holders, so people who are here as international students or as sponsored workers, as graduates, and those people are crucial to hospitality. So the world that I relied on for great stories and for great things to eat, you know, they were part of all those hospitality families, those restaurant families, those bakery families, and they weren't being looked after by the government. So I don't know, I didn't really think about it. To me, it was just incredibly unjust. And so I started to advocate for a political change, but also to assist those people in a practical way. And just down the road from Zelda, Maaryasha's Bakery is Attica Restaurant, so, you know, one of Australia's most renowned restaurants. And yeah, just through a long association with the chef and owner Ben Shuri, we decided to start making soup and feeding temporary visa holders, which was a project that we ran through the course of 2020. And then we just made soup, and it was a practical assistance, but it was also about awareness raising. So because of the restaurant's profile, and I guess because I'm a journalist, we got a bit of attention for it, and just tried to create some noise. And I certainly wouldn't take any credit for it, but when they brought around the next round of payments after JobKeeper, and it became the COVID disaster payment, that was able to be accessed by temporary visa holders. So it was, it was a political win, even in tricky times. Don't clap me. But yeah, I mean, I just think community, everybody's part of it, right? And to me, that we had people who were here in Australia who'd been welcomed here, asked to come here. International students, you know, they're so important to the economy. I mean, you know, I'm sure at Gordon it's like a massive part of the business model. And for those people that are just told to go home, that to me was not acceptable.
Well, just in time.
Amazing.
If you syrup your babka, when it's really hot, it will stay moister for longer. This is how Kim makes no wrinkles in her cakes. We had discussions on, so we'll see who's got more wrinkles, Kim. This one. Dani, you became like a voice for a lot of people. And I also think that you became a little bit of a voice for GrAiNZ as well. So it's really special that you're here. By the way, when I asked Dani, I didn't even finish my sentence. She's like, of course. When I said, can you come? Of course. So I think we're very lucky.
I mean, I'm surrounded by Babka. I think I'm lucky.
I think it's the same. It's just a simple syrup. We were talking about this because some bakeries make it. You can make like a giant mess. You can do it in the tin or without the tin, I don't know. But what we do now, so that we don't have like pools of sugar all over the bakery, we bake our babkas in those kind of confoil things because it's just much, much easier. And also our tin loaves are dairy free and they have to be completely separate from anything dairy. So we take them from the tray and we do something like this to catch the syrup. And it's much neater. And you've got to do it while it's hot. If you miss it while it's hot, use hot syrup. But if you do it when it's really hot, it will absorb it and it won't become gooey. If you do have the time to do something like this, even better, because you won't get the pools at the bottom. We don't have that time. So there's a little bit of pooling which people really like. And I think you can do it with the paper too.
I mean, you've got the ladle, but no. How do you know when it's enough?
Oh, the ladle. Yeah.
It's like,
I stole it from the chef. There? By the way, he's looking for all his stuff. Like, where's my stuff? He's like an actual chef. I stole everything from wherever. I think that a lot of us here, especially so many people, I'm not a baker, I'm a microbaker. It's also familiar to me, I just have a little bakery of a few loaves and stuff. So many people at GrAiNZ, and you know what? You know more because you've had to work so much hard to get where you are. You know, like you fucked up so much more. No one taught you. You are coming out knowing so much. So like don't ever think that it's little. I spent so long thinking I'm just a home baker. And I am a bit of a home baker and I do have a lot of skills I need to learn, like organisation skills and planning and managing and stuff, but you've developed so many other skills when you've had to work with no equipment. And that's the other thing I find, that people that are professional bakers and they write cookbooks, they're like, okay, I'm just going to go from my bakery and let's see if I can make it at home. If you've worked in a bakery, making it at home, it's not the same as a home baker. like no comparison. So you've had to work and try and make croissants without a prover, which is probably the hardest thing you can ever do. And you've baked one pot at a time, and you've, I don't know, had to learn in a very, very long way. So understand that you've learned a lot through that process.
Amazing. Very empowering words and very delicious syrup-soaked babka. You're done, right? We can get people to applaud
Yeah, we're
you
done.
now.
We're
All
done,
right.
we're done.
Give it up for Maaryasha. There's no syrup down here on the ground at all.
Standard.
Nothing happened here.